Hi guys, welcome to part 2 for the lesson 3 of Photoshop CS5 Extended Essentials. In our last part, we talked about smart objects and we didn't really complete it because there's a little more that you should know about smart objects and the wonderful features that it has. So one of the features that smart objects has, something called smart filters, and basically let's just go and create a new document. It's maybe something around the size of 102468. Maybe open a few new images as well, just so you can see what happens. Let's pick this one. Let's pick something colored like this one. Just copy and paste these two into the same document so you can see what we mean. Again, this can be done to any image or even to a shape. It doesn't necessarily have to be an image. Since it's a filter and filters are fun, it's best seen on maybe a colored image or an image with a lot of color and a lot of texture to it. A lot of different items in it, for example. So, what is a smart filter? A smart filter is basically any filter applied to a smart object, and filters can be found in the filter menu here. I think except for a few filters like liquify or vanishing point, pretty much all of the other filters can be used on smart objects. So first off, let's just convert these two images to smart objects so that the original is saved somewhere behind the scenes safely and we can edit the images in our document without any worries. Now if you go to filter, and you have a variety of filters to pick from. As you can see already, liquify and vanishing point have been grayed out, so you can't use these on smart objects as filters. But for example, we can use this. This brings up a window. Let's just break this window down so you can see it. And minimize this so we can all see what this actually does. And you have all these different filters available to you. Pick anyone you like. You can even play around with the brush size, play around with the sliders. I quite like this one actually. Increase the brush detail, decrease the shadow intensity. So it looks like a watercolor, kind of, but not really. Increase the texture. So there we go. That's a quick way to work with an image. And just hit OK. So what happens when you apply a filter to a smart object? Let's just move the layers so you can see it properly and it's not in the corner somewhere. It appears as a filter underneath your smart object, and if you hit the eye, the filter effect can't be seen. This white box basically represents the layer mask or the filter mask of the filter. And if we use the brush tool, you can remove certain parts of the current smart filter. You can also keep adding filters in. For example, lens blur is grayed out, so you can't use that. You can also use a Gaussian blur on this. And as you can see, because I painted this area black, remember what we said about layer masks? Black areas cannot be seen, white means they're visible. So because I painted that particular area in the smart filters darker, all of the changes won't be made to that particular part of the image. So this can provide very fun effects. For example, I'm writing my name. Let's just undo that. And that's basically how smart filters work. You can add any number of smart filters to your smart object, but if, for example, you wanted to add or convert the smart filter, for example, if you had let's just duplicate this and rasterize this. And if you rasterize a smart object, you can't change it any further. So quick note, you can also you can hit convert for smart filters. And basically they say to enable re-editable smart filters, selected layer will be converted into a smart object. So once this is converted into a smart object, just go into, just pick any pattern and we're going to work with the halftone pattern. Okay. So that's one of the smart filters. But if you wanted to convert this to an actual filter for a layer, you'll have to rasterize this and then go into filter, convert for smart filters, and there you go. And that's how masking works for smart filters. You can even disable or enable the filter mask or delete the filter mask. And supposing you want this filter mask back, just go into layer and then go into smart filter and then pick add filter mask. That's basically how you can add your mask back. So don't worry if you ever accidentally hit delete instead of disable. You can always bring it back. You can also add a filter mask to selection, subtract, or intersect filter mask with your selection. Click on your options. This is your current display options. Right now we don't want it to appear as red. Hit OK, hit OK. So it's fine as it is. You can also play around with your masks just like you would in a layer mask. Make sure that the smart filter mask is selected and you can adjust the density. For example, if we painted this area black, adjust the density. How much of an impact should the filter mask have, and should it be feathered? So you can do all of that and much more, much like the layer mask tool in Photoshop. That's about it. Now remember that we talked about saving a workspace. Well, there are a lot of different panels that are in a workspace and a lot of differences. For example, if I was in the essentials, let me just reset essentials. You might notice that we have very few panel options. We just have color, swatches, styles, adjustments and masks, layers, channels, and paths. But if we go into design, the first thing that takes priority is not colors but swatches, because in painting, that's what you want quick access to a certain palette. Then character or paragraph, so type comes second, and then layers and channels and paths. If you go into painting, again swatches is the main priority, but you also have the brushes, presets, and the brush tools available to you. Layers, channels, and paths at the bottom as always, and brushes take more priority in design. In photography, and this gets pretty interesting, you have your navigator, also your history, your actions so far, and whether you want to save any of these actions and repeat them. So we go into that, I believe, in our intermediate or in our advanced lessons, so check that out if you're interested. But anyway, you also have channels separately, not together with paths, character or paragraph tabs to work with, and then text as well. So you have character and you have paragraph separately, brushes separately, because you never really know what you might need for compositing in a photograph. So this has the most panels in Photoshop. Then you also have 3D, and this deals specifically with the 3D section in Photoshop, 3D menu. You also have motion, and this brings up a timeline at the bottom with animation for the frames. And you can view it two ways. You can view it either as individual frames, or you can view it as a gigantic timeline. Scroll through the timeline, and if you have an idea of how animation works, this is a really great addition to your workflow. You can also do new in CS5 or new in CS4, and it specifically shows you those features that are new to CS4 onwards. As always, you can reset from here. I'm going to go back to essentials, reset the essentials. There we go. There are tons of other channels that aren't really included. Sometimes you have your masks, your measurement log, your navigator, sometimes your notes, if you have any notes to add to the document, paragraph, path, style, swatches, tools, presets, and so on. Each workspace is customized according to the purpose it is designed for. So for design, typeface is most important. For painting, you obviously need brushes a lot of the time, so that panel is automatically available to you. You can also toggle, if your screen is big enough, you can use this little bar to pull the menus towards you so that you can see all of them. That's basically the workspace. You can also choose your screen mode, so you can go standard screen mode at the moment. You go full screen mode with the menu bar, and this isn't really viewable. So and there's also full screen mode. So now they're warning me that in full screen mode, these panels on the side, they are hidden, and they can be accessed on the side of the screen or revealed by pressing tab. So while in full screen mode, I can return to the standard screen mode by pressing F or escape. So I'm going to let this show me the notice again in case I forget. Just go full screen, and that's all I have to work with. If I hover over to the side, I get a toolbar. If I hover here, I get all my panels. And this is a very minimalistic way of working, and some people like working like this. So I hit escape, and I'm back to my regular view. So if you like working like that, go ahead and try it out. You can choose whether you want to tile it all in the grid, float all in windows. For example, if you had multiple images, let's open a few different images. This one, like this one, and this one. Let's just put them back here. And this refers to arranging your documents. So you can either consolidate them all or tile all in a grid, and there you go, this is what it looks like. Or have them, appear like this, or have them appear like horizontally, and so on. This is purely for aesthetic reasons. Consolidation works for me, so I can see one at a time. But again, if you prefer the tiled version, for example, if you're processing a lot of photos, you might prefer that. You can also choose to show your grids or not. For a photograph, for example, if you want to look at the composition, choose to show grid to make sure that you've got the right perspective. Show rulers and show the guides. These are your guides. That's basically all about the workspace in Photoshop. Now you know how to create one, delete one, as well as replace a workspace if you delete it by accident, but you also know what is within your workspace. Finally, let me just reset essentials. In the corner is the current zoom level of your image. It's also at the top, it's written at the top. You're currently at 100% of the image, so you're seeing the actual size of the image. And you can also choose, if you click on the tiny arrow here, you can choose whether you want to see information about the Adobe Drive or document sizes. So the document right now, what our document size is 2.25 megabytes out of 3.15 megabytes. You can also choose to see the document profile, the color profile. So right now this is sRGB, the default color profile of Photoshop. What the dimensions are, the measurement scale. So 1 pixel is equal to 1 pixel over here, scratch sizes, and so on. I think it's useful always to be able to see either the document size or the document dimensions, because this isn't really written at the top of your image anywhere, usually, and it's always good to keep in mind what your document is like. Or for example, if you're working in print, you could also choose to show the document profile so that you have a reminder of what the color profile is, and you could change it later on if you went to print. It is recommended to change it earlier on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about searching and organizing files, and this isn't necessarily part of Photoshop, but when you are designing a lot and when you're working with a lot of images, let's just close this, close all of these, let's just close all of them. So when you're working with a lot of images, it's good to have a system for all your folders. For example, you might have various folders named, for example, numbers like this. And instead, it's always good to, if you've saved an image, name it according to what you see it as. So this is a backlit image, and I've named that as backlight. Some of them I've downloaded, so they've been named according with the artist, and so on. Name your images appropriately, and for example, if we go to our libraries, and if we go to pictures, that's one folder. And if I go into my picture folder, I've basically named each folder according to a kind of category. So each one has its own topic, you could say. Always try to put a hierarchy to your files. So if you have a picture folder, then you could add 3 folders within the picture folder. One folder could be for print images, one could be for web, one could be for personal images, and so on. Try to stay organized with your images, because in the long run, when you are searching for your file at 12 a.m. in the morning to send to a printer, it's always good to have a clear and understandable file name with an easy location. And as always, when you're sending an image across somewhere, or you're sending a document across, a Photoshop document across, make sure that all of the fonts are not unique to your computer and that they can be read, or include the font as well for the person to install when sending the entire file across, so that you don't have any unlinked files. Leveraging metadata. This is something else that's pretty interesting about Photoshop, especially about images. Now, what metadata means is, let me see, let's open an image that I've taken, for example. I usually take pictures with my Nikon, and there we go, there's a folder that I recently uploaded. It's on my desktop, I haven't had time to name it. Let's pick this delicious cinnamon roll, for example. So I haven't had time to edit most of my images either. And let's go into File, and then go right at the bottom, File Info. So that's Alt-Shift-Control-I, that's the shortcut that you could use. Basically, when you hit File Info, you get a box or a window, and it contains information about the image. So right now there's no description of the author or the document title. But if I go into the camera data, because this is an image directly taken from the camera, you can see all the information about my camera, what the current settings were when I took it, whether there was a flash, and so on. The same thing would apply for a video or for audio, for mobile flash files, and other categories. You might notice one of the types are DICOM, and DICOM, if you remember, was a format that was specifically for medical images. So they have the patient name, patient ID, and so on. You can add that in here, in your file info. You can also go into advanced and see all of the properties of the image, and even delete some of them if you'd like. But it's really not recommended, since metadata this is metadata essentially. So what metadata is it's data about the image, and it's always good to have that, because it's sort of like author credits. You could even add in metadata. For example, this is cinnamon roll. I'm going to call this one cinnamon roll with oranges. That's the name of the document. The author of this is me, Smoilin. The author title, let's just call this Smoilin again. And what the description is breakfast, for example. You can even add in the description writer, keywords for the image, and the copyright notice as well, and the copyright info also. You can add a copyright to all the images that you've taken or designed, if they're yours, if they're completely by you. And this will be saved along with the image. So whenever the image is transferred anywhere, all of this information will travel with it. Naturally, if you have 1,000 pictures to add metadata or copyright to, so you have different types of copyright status. You can choose whether to make this a public domain image or a copyright image. But if you have a lot of images to go through, you might not want to type everything again and again and again. So you can export your current description. When you export, you'd be saving it as an XMP file in AppData, Adobe XMP metadata templates, but you can choose to save it on desktop. And the file name, I'm going to name this as metadata template, just so I know. keep the name memorable so that you always know what this is. Like, for example, copyright off so-and-so, or public domain copyright data, or something like that. Just hit save. Now, if I wanted to say, let's just open multiple cinnamon roll images. This one was open already. Let's open all of these. And if I wanted to add, and they're pretty big as you can tell, so they take a bit of time to load. And if I wanted to add metadata to all of them, so if I go to File Info, and all I have to do is hit the little arrow over here and import a template. So I can choose to clear the existing properties and replace with the template properties, or keep the original metadata over here, but replace matching properties from the template. Or I can choose to keep the original metadata, but cancel out matching properties from the template, or add on to the matching properties from the template. I think I'll keep original metadata, but replace matching properties from the template. Just hit OK. I saved mine on desktop, so it was called metadata. Oops, I think we just passed it. It was called the metadata template, and hit open. And it's all there. And just hit OK. And your metadata is saved. And then you can also do that again and again and again for all of these images. Remember that to keep the metadata within the image, you must save your image by going to File, Save, or File, Save As. Otherwise, the metadata doesn't really save up, and all your effort is to waste. You can also go into Bridge and edit metadata from there if you have the Bridge program. It takes a bit of time to load initially. For example, if I picked this image and if I went into metadata, so I can see exactly, I can see all of the info. As you can see, some of them have color profiles and some of them don't. Most of them have the default color profiles. Let's pick, let's see, New York. If we go into File and then go into the file info of the file that we just selected, metadata at the moment on the side is just a way of viewing the image. You'd get the same file window as well as you would get in Photoshop, and then you can add your metadata the same way and import or export data the same way. And that's about it. That's really how you add information to your image in Photoshop or outside of Photoshop if you'd like. Outputting is another important feature of Photoshop, especially when you're saving your file. Sometimes you want to export a file to another program, for example, Illustrator, or you want to save it as a PDF document. For starters, you can do that within Bridge, and we currently have Bridge open. So go into your Output workspace. This is the workspace section of Bridge, and automatically the output panel comes up. You can choose the content that you want to output your image or set of images as. For example, this one, go into your preview so that you can see what image it is. For example, you might have a lot of tiny thumbnails and you can't really make out what it is. So you can go into preview. If your preview window is not available, just go into window and you can bring up all of those panels. And then you can choose what you'd like to save it as. You can choose to save it as a web gallery or as a PDF, and what kind of template is it. So if it's custom, what's the width, what's the height, what is your preset, so photo or for the web, and then so on and so forth. And then go down and you'll see various tabs. You can toggle each tab up. You can minimize or maximize each tab. So we just went over the document tab. I want to send this across as a photo, send it across as this is a width by height. So this is in portrait. So 8 by 10. 8 by 10 should be okay. So the width is 8, height is 10. But this image is actually pretty small. And it's a PNG, so it's very unlikely that it will go out for print. So if you were trying to convert this to print, this is a good way to do so. Make sure the quality is at 300 at the very least. PPI means pixel per inch, so that's got 300 pixels per inch. You can also increase that So this refers to your resolution. Go to full if you like, or 300. 300 is pretty good. Your quality, you can reduce it or increase it. Whether the person will require a password for the PDF image and permissions and so on. Then you can also choose your layout. How would you like the image to be placed? Use auto spacing or repeat one photo per page. I chose rotate for best fit because it depends on the document. And then sometimes you can even leave it up to Bridge to decide. Overlays is the file name, so that would appear at the bottom of the image. If you select that, you can even choose how the file name would appear and what kind of size it would be. So for me, file name is not selected. Just want the image to be sent across. You can choose a header and a footer, as well as a playback if it's a presentation, as well as a watermark if you'd like, and then hit save. If you check this, the PDF will open after you've saved it, and you can view the PDF. If you go into web gallery, you can choose a large number of images actually for your web gallery. So let's pick this one. Hold down Control or Shift. Control allows you to select images from anywhere. Shift would select in one line. So for example, if I selected these set of images for the web gallery, you can even do that for the PDF, by the way, and would save all of these images one by one in one document. But for now, we're going to go into web gallery, and it would save it in the exact order that you selected them in. And just pick a standard template, but you can choose whether you want a film strip, a journal with a slideshow, or so on. It would create that template for you, and you can choose to preview in browser. So let's pick journal with film strip. If I hit preview in browser, these are all the default settings. This is the code that our web gallery would be using for our web gallery. This is one way to work with the images, to output them. You can either output a lot of images into a web gallery, and there are a lot of options to go through, such as your gallery title, copyright info and credits, color palette of the web gallery, the appearance, and so on. Where it would require a password for the server, and then you can pick to upload. That's it. That's really how you output in Bridge. Now to export in Photoshop, for example, let me open a quick document. Let's open this one. This is my pinboard, or at least used to be my pinboard. Let's see. If I wanted to export this, a lot of options currently are grayed out. You can choose data sets as files, and that is basically data. You can send that out as files, paths to Illustrator. So let's open a new document. Let's create a few paths. And you can export, for example, this path. You go into File, Export, Paths to Illustrator. You can name this a work path, hit OK, and then choose where you want to save it to. So, as in Illustrator file. That's basically how you use export paths. If you wanted to export, for example, video, right now we don't have video, but you can choose to export. After applying effects to your video, you can choose to export and render video, and it will render the video out of Photoshop and save it wherever you'd like. You can also choose, besides save and save as, and besides close and go to Bridge and then, export the image, you can also save for web and devices. This is really useful if you have a GIF, for example, and you have animation on it. And this is specifically for animated GIFs. This is a little trick where you can save all of your layers as an animated GIF by just picking GIF and hitting save. Really, that is about it. Within Save for Web and Devices, though, it's actually meant for saving websites or saving assets for the web. So this is pretty big. Let's try to copy this, for example, and paste it on a smaller canvas, like 1024 into 768. That's pretty big. Bring this down to size just a little bit. Now supposing your website was 1024 into 768 in size, just pull this up. There we go. So this is what my finboard used to look like. It looks a little different a lot of the times. Just stick a lot of different stuff up. But if you wanted to send this to the web, you could go to File Save for Web and Devices. Now, one interesting to keep note of is save it as a JPEG, a PNG 8-bit, or a PNG 24-bit, or a Windows BMP, or bitmap, basically a bitmap image. We'll pick the JPEG image, and you can see all of the memory, how much memory this takes up. You can choose how much download time it would take. So it's fine as it is. It's 190.8 kilobytes, and if you save for web and devices, metadata can get wiped out if the option is picked as none. But if you pick all, notice that this one doesn't have much metadata. So all except camera info or copyright and contact info or just the copyright. If you picked all, it would also include your metadata. Make sure that this is chosen as all if you'd like to save your copyright on the image, if you'd like to save all of the author credits and so on. Convert to sRGB basically means that no matter what the color profile of the image is, if it were CMYK or a different RGB color space, it would automatically get converted to sRGB specifically for the web so that it displays uniformly, as uniform as possible across all web devices. These options basically refers to the way the image downloads on the web. And progressive, if you select, hold on, let's just pick progressive. Now what happens is the image will download completely in progressive, but it sort of downloads in parts. So you'd see a blurred image and then each part of the image gets clearer and then the next part gets clearer and so on. If you pick optimized, the whole image loads just part by part by part, as you might see with a lot of images on the web. You can even choose to embed a color profile. This is a bit of a risky step. So as you can see, look at the corner. So if I unchecked embed color profile, the memory space is the memory that the image takes up is 192.1 kilobytes. If I pick embed color profile, it becomes 195.2 kilobytes. So this adds memory to your image, and this is really an optional step because sometimes people's monitors might not be calibrated properly, so they might not calibrated, meaning that they don't have the right color settings to view your image. So embedding a color profile when their device cannot view color properly would just be a bit of a wasteful move in a sense, because it's recommended to reduce your memory as much as possible when putting an image on the web so that it loads quickly and takes up less server space. It depends actually, because most people don't have calibrated monitors or have monitors perfectly set up to view colors. So again, this is up to you. You can choose to embed color profiles so that people with calibrated monitors can see the proper colors of your image and so on. Optimized is really the best option. You can choose what quality you want it at, 60, 100. So if we zoom in, it's currently at 200 zoom. This is the full view of the image. You can zoom out as well, see the entire thing. So at 100% quality is pretty good. Notice what happens as we go down. We go right to the bottom, see that the image gets very pixelated at 0 quality. Slowly at about 50, it looks okay. At 100, notice that some of the color over here, let's just zoom in. Let's just go back to 50. Notice that it gets pretty weird around here. It does add a few pixels and it gets a lot smoother if you go to 100%. Choose to blur the image as well, although this really isn't necessary. You can also choose matte or eyedropper color, foreground color, background color while the image is loading. That's about it. And if you have animation over here is grayed out, but if you pick GIF, and if your image had animation, let's duplicate this. Let's go into motion, go into frames, and add a second frame. So basically, if you had animation in your image of some sort, this window would, or this space would automatically enable itself, and you could save it as a GIF and loop it and choose how you want to loop the image, once or forever. Choose to play it and preview the animation and so on. So it's pretty interesting. If you go into GIF, you can choose what kind of GIF would you like, what kind of color scale would you like, diffusion, how many colors. Right now the full range of colors for a GIF is selected. Dither basically refers to it's kind of like a gradient where pixels gradually reduce as they move out. So dither is at 100%, so it's better to keep it that way. Watch as we reduce this. It gets pretty pixelated. So we increase this. And if we reduce, notice that this area becomes very patchy. So if you want to keep a smooth gradient, you'd be increasing the sizes of this as much as you can, so that the pixels blend into each other. You also have lossy. Notice how grainy the image gets as I move that up. So it's basically throwing away color information. And web snap. And these are all ways to reduce the memory your image takes up, and you have to play around with the settings a little. You do have to compromise with quality a lot of the time, and that's something that is expected when you put an image up for the web, that you have to compromise and you have to make the image smaller, hopefully not compromise too much, and that's why all of these options are available for you in Save for Web and Devices. That's about it for outputting. Preparing an image is very easy in Photoshop because Photoshop is made for preparing images. In, I believe, our last lesson, in our second lesson, we talked about the healing brush tools, the stamp and the dodge burn tools, and so on. What you can do is, when you open an image, example, let's go with the one that I just opened. You can prepare an image by going into the filter, into the lens correction, and so on. You could use the healing brush tools, the patch tools, and so on. And you also learned how to edit an image's perspective with vanishing point. You could also use dodge, or you can use these tools, the blur tool, the sharpen tool, the smudge tool, as well as the dodge, burn, and sponge tool as well, to repair your image if there are any issues with it manually. So you don't necessarily have to use the filter to remove noise. You can always manually blur out parts of the image, or smudge or sharpen parts of the image, and likewise dodge, burn, sponge. So I'll just show you what these two do. Let's make the brush size a little bigger so that we can all see. Let's just go inside to this. And I'll work with the photography workspace since it has the navigator tool in it. If I use the blur tool, let me just duplicate the image. The strength of the blur tool is currently at 50%. The mode is normal, although you can choose whether to make the area darkened or lightened and play around with the hue, saturation, color, and luminosity. You can also choose the kind of brush you'd like to work with. So for example, if it was at 100%, this is me blurring out an image. Now this takes time. Notice the difference. This is pretty clear, this is not. So the blur tool is a manual way to add blur to an image. You can also use the smudge tool, and it's actually pretty intense what the smudge tool does. It sort of twists and distorts your image, sort of as though it were liquid or jello. And you can even sharpen a particular part of the image. So let's remove what the smudge tool did. Let's sharpen the image. Again, you can adjust the strength over here. and get the image a little sharper again. It's not as sharp as the original, but we'll get there eventually. So if there are certain parts of the image that are blurred, for example, if you were taking a shot of a friend and you wanted everything to be perfectly clear, not blurred out, or for example, a gust of wind was there, so there's a bit of a motion blur in the trees behind her or something like that, you could use the sharpen tool to just sharpen up just a bit the background behind the friend in the image, for example. Okay, you can also use the dodge tool, for example. In this area, it's pretty dark, so you can use the dodge tool to get rid of what we would call vignetting manually, and this, as you can see, lightens up the image quite a lot. So and look at the range it's currently in. For example, over here it says midtones, so it's currently in midtones, but you can also choose shadows, specifically working with shadows. Or choose highlights, and this makes it pretty bright because it's working with white now. And you get the idea. So this is pretty bright. It's sort of like shining a light on your image. This is what dodge does, where it dodges all of the color pixels in the image and makes them more vibrant. Which is kind of how we see color in the first place. You can also choose the burn tool, and the burn tool actually darkens an area, so it does the opposite of the dodge tool, where it burns your color pixels. Notice what happens when I do this. It's burning the color pixels. So although my image was dull before, now it's going to have a higher contrast as well, because I'm manually using the burn tool to darken certain areas of the image, pixels in the image, quite simply. You can also use the sponge tool. What this does is it sort of undoes what you've done earlier with the image. For example, we've lost a lot of detail over here, so the sponge tool helps reduce it, brings back the original color in the image a little bit, though not too much, by spreading out the colors and bleeding them out. So notice as I pull this end, the other sides get more blue. So that's basically what the sponge does. It spreads out the pixels and sort of reduces the intensity of the image. It's sort of like applying a sponge basically on top of the image physically in Photoshop. That's it. So this is desaturate, but you can also choose to saturate your image, add more color, and you can choose how much flow you want. So this is a good way to work manually for fixing up an image. Of course, there are other ways, and we've discussed that as well earlier on. Notice how bright this part of the image has suddenly become because of the dodge tool and the burn tool, the smudge tool, and so on. And that's the end of part 2 for lesson 3 of Photoshop CS5 Extended Essentials. In the next part and the final part of our entire course, we're going to talk about layers, specifically the layer style window, how to use layer groups and layer comps, so organizing your layers. And that's a pretty cool trick to know if you're going to be designing a web page or if you have a lot of layers to work with. So see you in part 3.